Okay, well, this is a video that's related to Isonzo. It's a brand new World War One game series, game that's released just now. It's based on or around the Isonzo front, as the name suggests, in Slovenian, known as the Soška Fronta, which was a front between mostly the Italians and the Austro-Hungarians. Now, that's all fun and games. However, we're here to talk about the game, not the actual historical importance of it, or events related to it. So me, Slajan, and Killwolf, who's a friend of mine, who's an absolute history and gun nut, will be basically just talking about the game and our experiences with it. We both participated in the Sonso testing, so we've been with the game for a long time. And well, frankly, we both really want the game to succeed. However, as it stands, I don't really know we can recommend it to be bought. Um, The game is on sale on Steam and other platforms, I believe, for €30 with the base version, and all the way up to €60, I believe, is the price tag for the quote-unquote collector's edition, the most expensive one. And frankly speaking, for that price tag, I really cannot recommend it because, I mean, at €60, you're competing with AAA games, and frankly speaking, this game has far too many flaws, far too little content to be a good purchase for €60, and I'm struggling to recommend it even for €30. I personally believe in quality over quantity. However, I reckon that this game lacks both quality and quantity to justify the price tag of €30+, considering you can get some absolutely banging games for that money, including both of the previous World War One games, which were even free for a while, especially if you were on Epic Game Store. Now, this video is going to take a while. We wanted to cover most aspects of the game that at least the two of us, know anything about. So it's going to take a while. So if you want that, stick around. If you don't, you just want to know the TLDR. As I said, I wouldn't say we recommend the game. Despite the fact that the game itself isn't bad, it's not really worth the price tag. It has some pretty dodgy game mechanics, especially related to progression. Its graphics are fantastic, and its maps look gorgeous. However, there's not really many of them, neither weapons nor maps themselves, frankly. Other content is frankly lacking. The movement is fine, it's functional, however, it kind of falls behind what I believe we've gotten used to with some of the releases that have come out in the last few years, both in the arcade and more realistic game genres or subgenres. The performance is fantastic, though there are still some bugs and glitches to be found. No doubt, hopefully they will be fixed in the future. But yeah. Now, if you are going to stick around, we're going to move on to the first topic. So, the first topic will be the movement and the kind of general gameplay related to the game, since this game has had some changes and additions to the previous entries in the series, Isonzo and Tannenberg. As far as movement is concerned, there's not really much to change that has been changed, except for one, what I would consider pretty nice addition, which is vaulting. So now chest high walls and windows and such can be vaulted through, not unlike what you're used to, for example, if you've played Rising Storm or Battlefield or Squad or any other similar shooter that has come out in the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years, basically. It's a small addition, but it's a good one. In Tannenberg and Verdun, you kind of had the issue with sometimes getting stuck in places and trenches where it was really annoying. That said, while the movement has been improved, I will say that it still kind of falls behind, I think. There is still no leaning in the game of any sort of like any sort of kind, not even mounting leaning like you found in Modern Warfare 2019 and later Call of Duties, for example. It's not a thing at all, which I would say definitely is a missed opportunity, especially considering the trenchy environments and such of the game. Similarly, there's no such thing as crouch or even prone sprinting. Like, for example, you used, well, Battlefield 5, for example, you're used to crouch sprinting. And if you played Squad or before, for example, and Postscriptum or Beyond the Wire, you'd be used to, well, not just crouch sprinting, but also prone sprinting. So short range, the ability to, for a short duration of short length, path, whatever, to crouch faster, so that in case you're under fire and you can't go pro and you can't really like stand up or crouch even because it's just you're just barely in cover, you can still move into some more proper cover while prone slightly faster for a short time. The game doesn't have any of that, and I think that's a bit of a shame. The proning is also feels fairly stiff. The transitions from proning and into proning especially are very stiff feeling. So again, the movement is improved and it is functional, but it's far from as good as it could be. Changes are also seen with the team and squad composition. So in previous games, you had each team had multiple squads, which contained 4 people, and each of these squads was different from others. They sometimes were completely different factions, belonging to different countries. They had their own the command or the squad leaders for them had their own call-ins available, the weapons available, and various passive and active perks and buffs available to classes in a faction were different from the same classes perks and weapons available for other squads. It meant that while you had quite a lot of variety per team, as you could have, for example, in Verdun, one team could have American, British, and French weapons, well, squads, and each of them would have their respective factions' weapons, which was a very cool way of having a lot more variety. Um, each class, which in a squad, had 3 preset loadouts, and these loadouts tended to be balanced amongst each other. You couldn't customize them; you could just pick which loadout you wanted to use. But the general benefit, cost, and disadvantages went along the lines of longer ranges meant weaker performance in close range, and vice versa. So, for example, a revolver only loadout would be a bit more power, have a bit more grenades, for example, as it had a longer reload and fewer rounds available between reloads compared to a pistol. And a rifle would be far more powerful at longer ranges and far weaker than a pistol at closer ranges, and loadouts reflected that. It was a good way to, like I said, get more variety, but also balance out performance of certain loadouts. You couldn't just have the be-all end-all loadout to be useful in every situation. Frankly, that just wasn't a thing because of the presets being designed that way. In the new game, so in Isonzo, that was all scrapped. So the 2 teams have, well, the squads in them only really act as mobile spawn points. It's more in line to what you're used to from Battlefield than previous games in the series, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, to be fair, as and the loadout, the presets selection was replaced with a more flexible, more modern, customizable loadout selection, which is again not a bad thing. I think the execution wasn't that bad. It was actually fairly solid, but it does run into some issues, which we'll look around into slightly later. With the removal of various different squads or faction, having their own squad leaders, which all had their own call-ins, that was also removed and replaced with an officer system. So each team has 2 people that can be officers, which is a special class that they can use. It's more limited in terms of loadouts to only secondary weapons, more particularly, revolvers and pistols, with 1 rifle available per faction. The call-ins for these offices aren't unique anymore. So while before different squad leaders could choose between different artillery types or different like recon or different gas barrages. That's not the case anymore. Instead, when an officer comes up to a radio to call anything in, they are greeted with a big old sheet, if you will, where they just have all the available call-ins available, and they have everything available. And the call-ins they're separated into columns. You have the artillery, the plane, and the um
You could call it the chemical section, I guess.
chemicals. Yes, the chemical section. Thank you. So each of these sections has a completely separate cooldown or loadout cooldown. So you can call in a stonk of artillery onto an objective, and that will trigger the cooldown for everything in the artillery column. However, it's not going to affect the chemical, it's not going to affect the plane columns, which kind of runs into a problem. Because the lack of any resources management and so you're just playing with cooldowns means that you can call in three extremely powerful and obnoxious like call-ins at basically
At the
the
same
same time.
time.
Yeah. It basically means that you can have a giant plane barrage which drops, what was it, like 96 bombs, I think?
Something like that, yeah.
It's 3 heavy bombers, combined with like 5 or 12 large caliber artillery pieces being thrown onto a map, combined with like 5 mustard gas shells, which covers a reasonable area and has like 3 minutes before it disperses. It can get really annoying. And because it's just 2 officers doing all that, and by the way, they have separate cooldowns, so you can have that happen to you twice. How fun! Um, because you only have 2 people doing it. It like before it meant that one commander or one squad leader in previous games had very limited power, right? As a squad leader, I could dump some artillery on someone, but I was like 3 shells, maybe 5, and then I had a cooldown, and I couldn't do anything else related to call-ins. Meanwhile, here I can do that, but then 2 minutes later call in a bomber, and then half a minute later call in gas, and who's gonna stop me? The answer is nobody and nothing. There's no game mechanic to prevent this absolutely horrendous abuse, basically.
Funny thing is, the previous games, like Verdana did very simple. Like every squad only had a single call-in, like a squad that just had smoke or just had just mortars or
Yeah,
had just gas.
exactly.
And the system was a bit weird because it scaled with squad level, and you got more powerful call-ins for squad level, so that was a bit busted. But they changed it for Tanberg, which was way better, where you basically have, I think, all the call-ins available. But also every squad, like the squads have different call-ins. There's recon squads, there's gas squads, there's artillery squads, but also every squad gets a smoke barrage, and it's actually a trade-off. You can either call in the smoke barrage or the whatever else you had. So it's not like you could call in both. So you had to decide if you wanted artillery now or you wanted smoke now, or if you wanted recon now or smoke now.
Yeah, and with the way this is set up, it means that it means that smoke artillery is rarely used, which is unfortunate because it triggers the cooldown of the the entire artillery or chemical section, or whatever. It triggers the entire cooldown. So if so, it's like, well, I'm gonna have the same cooldown on like the most powerful artillery in the game if I drop it or if I drop 2 smoke shells. Why would I use the smoke shells? Even though they're oftentimes needed, it's kind of like eh. But yeah, in previous games you basically only had, like I said, one thing. While I didn't like the level of the available call-ins based on the level of the squad, I think that was pretty bad. That said, the fact that the call-in you only had one call-in type per faction or per squad was incredibly good because it exactly prevented this sort of just throwing all the shit at the wall thing going on.
Also, it's
Beyond
also like
Beyond the Wire doesn't have that, but Beyond the Wire doesn't have that, but Beyond the Wire has a kind of like a commander call-in point system. So you can't just spam shit constantly because you have to get enough points for it, and that takes time. So it has resource management thrown in, which is fantastic. Sorry, you were saying.
Um, the Dannenberg system also promoted like a bit of team play because you could coordinate with other squads. You could like ask a recon squad for recon on a point before you called in the artillery, so you know if it wasn't maybe just a waste to call an artillery on that point right now. Or you could like coordinate with, I don't know, a gas squad, and they could gas the point before, and you could call your artillery in when their guys jumped in the point and stuff like that. So you could like it was also a team play element. It wasn't just like two guys go completely throwing everything they got on a single point so they could capture it and then move on.
Yeah, exactly. So another thing that was changed was the spawning. So the spawning system now is, well, it works similar to a battlefield game. You can spawn on your office, squad leader. You can spawn on other squad members. Pretty state-of-the-mill stuff. You're not usually spawned directly on them. Usually spawned close to them. In what the game deems, especially if they're on an objective, for example. And you can also spawn on, permanent, non-moving spawn points.
There's also
At the back of the
the
map, yes, and there's also the command posts which your team can build and the enemy team can destroy, and they kind of act as more forward spawn points. So between your main base, if you will, and the objective. They're kind of somewhere in between, and they provide a more forward spawning position while also not being permanent and not being nearly as safe, as enemies can still waltz in there and they can even destroy it. In which case you would have to rebuild it. The system works fine for the most part, except for the fact that sometimes spawning just doesn't really like you. You'll be familiar with it if you've played Battlefield games or Call of Duty games. Or Rising Storm 2, for example. You'll spawn and you'll immediately get shot, or you'll spawn and immediately get bombed, or spawn and immediately get gassed, and sometimes it can happen multiple times in a row, and it's fucking obnoxious, but frankly, it's just how it goes. You can't really perfectly predict it. It's a bit less annoying in when you're fighting mostly or entirely AI, but players are unpredictable. Especially some people can find some incredibly annoying or good and sweaty fucking spots, and you can't really predict it. So sometimes you are just bound to get immediately spawn killed, and with the spawn like timers being a bit on the slower side for shooters, it can get kind of frustrating. But if it's a deal breaker for you, then can't really be helped. For me personally, it's annoying as hell, but it's not the first or last time that I've run into it. So I mention it, but I'm not like, it's not really much more to say on it except that it works sometimes.
yeah, there's also the small issue with the spawning on the forward points with like while someone is destroying it.
Oh
That's
yeah.
kind of an annoying issue.
So for people that have played Squad, for example, they'll know that when there's too many enemies near a hub, which kind of acts in a similar way as the forward spawning positions in Isonzo, for people that don't know, when enemies are near it or the core of it gets damaged to a certain amount, you can't spawn it anymore. Isonzo doesn't seem to have that, so you can still spawn on a forward position while someone's digging it down, which means that far, far, far too often when you're digging one down, you'll just get spawned on and shot by an enemy, and that's incredibly frustrating. And it means that uh, if you're planning on going hunting for it, you basically need the perk that lets you destroy forward positions faster,
Or have a teammate with you, I
or
guess.
multiple, considering
Yeah, you
the
probably
wave
need
spawn.
someone who actually you can actually talk to and who like actually knows what he's supposed to do, like look out for enemies instead of just staring at the same thing you are currently hacking down.
Yeah, and also dying. Brings us to
Yeah.
the next topic. The Gore. The Gore is nice. Like artillery explosion stuff. Like it's along the lines of what we've seen in previous games. It's just the it's good. The only real problem with them is the ragdolls seem kind of iffy. They can also like still move around the twitch once they're dead, which fine. Sandstorm also does that, for example, and I'm pretty sure some other games do it, but they do it even after they get downed and then shot again. So, or a grenade explodes next to them, which is really can be distracting. Especially
Yeah,
considering
the
how many fucking bodies are sometimes thrown onto an objective. Because you need to understand people need to understand this is 48 players. Like that's you can absolutely have situations where it's going to be 15 v 15 in a small 40 by 40 meter area, right? It's an absolute clusterfuck sometimes, and having
yeah, with the trenches and certain choke points, there can be an absurd amount of corpses, and you just end up in situations where maybe just an enemy decides to lay down like just get down and lays in the corpses, and you can't really make him out anymore because there's like 3 people next to him spazzing out that are already dead, and they are still spazzing out like 10 minutes, like a few minutes afterwards because the bodies don't react to gunshots or grenades going off or anything. Like Sandstorm does this basically perfectly with like an enemy ragdolls and has his dying animation, but if he gets hit by something, he stops this animation, and
yeah,
that's
because
something I
he's
was waiting for in the other games as well, in the previous games, and I'm kind of sad they didn't improve on that.
yeah, basically in Sandstorm when someone's downed, they can, for example, start rolling around holding themselves by the neck, but then if you shoot them in again, they'll die because that's it. They go from bleeding out to gone. While in Isonzo, that's not really the case. And it's not a huge deal, but it can be kind of annoying. It's a small nitpick more than a big criticism, which most of the things I've mentioned so far have been. But we are getting to where that's not going to be the case anymore. Slowly but surely building up to the.
Mention is some games, a lot of games like do headshot noises when that basically sound like a helmet getting pierced, and that's fine. But I really wish games actually made different had like 2 sounds, one for a helmet getting hit and one for like if you just not wearing a helmet. Would just make for some nice variety, I guess. And yeah,
Yeah,
some people don't like it that the system is even there in the first place. I've recently talked to someone who really doesn't like it and would much rather prefer if the sound was only up close, but I guess for gameplay reasons, it's nice to have.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Again, small nitpick, but a nice thing to have. Which could be this game's fucking motto at this point. Moving on, we have maps, and maps are not many. That's, I think, a big problem, and it's kind of indicative of a problem we're going to talk a lot more about later on. That is genuinely a pretty big issue with this game is the content. But the maps themselves, while not many and some incredibly short, are very nice. They look absolutely gorgeous graphically. This game's really, really impressive, and it's kind of hard to believe sometimes it runs in Unity, because it definitely is one of the few games I've had to like take a double take to make sure I was actually playing a game. As corny as it sounds, it achieves the photorealism in certain areas phenomenally, especially with the wooded areas where the lighting can actually shine. Um, it's fantastic. Dolomiti, for example, is on the map that is it's set on like mountain peaks and stuff, and it's gorgeous. I'm pretty sure I've like it reminds me of hills I've actually gone on, because I am Slovenian. Um, and it's generally looks fantastic. It's like what I remember from when I was a wee lad and actually went hiking with my uncle and stuff up there. It's fantastic. Um, I have not really much to complain about as far as visual design of the game or the maps goes. That said, the maps sometimes kind of struggle with the same issue that I've had with Verdun and Tannenberg before, which was the fact that the game devs seem to like having some open areas between spawn points and the objective, both for the attackers and the defenders. I'm assuming that so that once one side can finally take over, that the other side can't just casually push back in. They have to actually fight properly for it and kind of go through the same process that the attackers did. The problem is that it can get kind of annoying having to basically throw enough shit at the wall, and the shit in this case being literally you, and staring a lot at constantly having to stare a lot at the respawn screen because you have little cover, and the limited equipment you have available for yourself doesn't really help let you help like do it well a lot of the time, like survive for a long time a lot of the time, can be kind of frustrating for a player, at least for me personally. I don't really like dying when it's not my fault for a fuck up, if that makes sense. And I would definitely count the fact that the open areas with lack of ways to give myself cover or have other people give me cover is definitely a negative for me. But then again, Rising to Verdun is fairly popular, it seems, right now. Tannenberg's the same. Rising Storm 2 is incredibly popular. They all have a similar style of game mode, so while that's my personal take on it, it seems a lot of people don't have an issue with it. So, to each their own, I guess.
Um, I'd mention for the maps specifically that they definitely portray the feel of the Italian front well.
Yeah,
Like
defo.
other games that do like different theaters sometimes like struggle to actually portray the different theaters as the actual things, but in this game you actually fight in proper mountains. Like there's one map in specific that I don't recall or
Mhm.
can't pronounce. Um, that has a section where you're like fighting on these little pathways.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And it's just like a really unique take for a shooter map. Like I don't know, it's just a unique take for compared to other shooters I've played, where the maps are usually the same, like jungle, island, flatlands, sometimes maybe a mountains, of course the city maps and stuff. But like the mountains in this game, or what some of the maps do, is actually something pretty unique for multiplayer shooters.
You're talking about the map that starts off assaulting a castle, like a mountain fort, and then moves on to mountains, right?
Yeah, it's
Singia.
if
It's that map's called
yeah,
Singia for people for the watchers. It's called Singia. The moment the game has 6 maps, and
yeah,
the one we're talking about is
um,
Singia. There's also one based on Gorizia, the town of Gorica, and a few others. The fjord, for example, has the wooded areas that I think look fantastic, and you start off in a valley with trees and woodlands, and then you basically move up the mountain, and the last objectives are fighting on top of open grassy plain hilltops. And like I said, gameplay wise, the amount of open area can kind of be annoying, but visually they are fantastic, visually varied and visually very striking maps. Zero, like a lot of people's only zero complaints from me. A lot of people's only real, I know that a lot of people's only real experience with the Isonzo front will be Battlefield 1, and frankly, Isonzo's maps blow that god-forsaken campaign and the absolutely horrible multiplayer map, out of the water. I'll say that. Um, the maps are generally very well designed, very very nice. The main problem with them is probably there's only a few of them. There's really a big lack of them, frankly. Now I'm hoping this gets fixed, post-launch extra content updates, but as it is right now, the maps look fantastic, but they can absolutely get very samey because no matter how gorgeous a map is, if you've played on it for the 20th time this week, the charm kind of wears off. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Also, when like some maps you don't even get to explore the entire map because I don't know you are attacking and the defenders are doing a really well job and you're basically seeing only a small part of the map the entire time because the maps are
They're big.
the maps are pretty lengthy but they're not very wide, if that makes sense. So
They're corridor. The maps, to put it nicely, they are a corridor.
yeah,
It's kind of like what you're used to from, well, it's kind of what you're probably used to, like people are probably used to from games like Insurgency, where and like Rush from Battlefield games, where you're kind of funneled, and Rising Storm, absolutely Rising Storm, where
yeah, definitely.
the map is long, hundreds of meters, maybe kilometers long, but the actual width is fairly limited, which means that you don't really have. It kind of struggles in the same part as Rising Storm 2 when it comes to breaking through a defense sometimes, where you don't really have the space to play around the defense. You literally just have a front line, and you can't really go around it that easily a lot of the time, which can get kind of frustrating. But I mean, some people seem to like it, considering the success of Rising Storm 2 and such, so, personal opinion,
Yeah.
probably. The game has a pretty heavy focus on cosmetics, which is also shown in the ending screen. The ending screen for the game has been changed from previous games, with, now you have, like, the models of, like, the best 5 players or best squad or whatever, so they can kind of show off their visual, like, cosmetic characters that they've made themselves. It's pretty cool. A lot of cosmetics are in the game by default. They will be available. More and more will unlock for you once you level up your overall account's level, which is fine. It's pretty standard. Um, However, there's also DLCs going to be available, which personally I'm not a fan of. But it is what it is. It means that in the future you can probably look towards Rising Storm 2, where there's a good amount of visuals available, just from playing the game for a long while, but also just as many available from, DLC that you have to pay a few euro for. Um, but I mean,
Should
it is what it
be it
is.
should be mentioned that it's a rare sight these days, but this game actually does their cosmetics like historically authentic.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, there's no like fucking robot arms or what have you a la Battlefield 5. It actually
post-war
feels
gas
authentic
masks.
and there's prosthetics, but like
They're
it's
fitting.
realistic.
The prosthetics are very fitting, and there's usually something related to like prosthetic nose, think like prosthetic nose and similar stuff. Prosthetic eye, maybe. It's looks good, looks fitting for the setting, and the devs themselves have gone on to say that the DLCs and stuff are, for DLCs and stuff as well, and just cosmetics. They're looking at actual uniforms of different militaries and different modifications to said uniforms. They're not, so you can't, for at least from what I know, you don't have to worry about encountering um a $15 DLC for that changes your player character to be Sir Edwin Rommel or
Yeah,
anything along those
stuff like
lines,
that.
or Adolf
Anything
Hitler,
along those lines.
as entertaining as that would be. Um, but yeah, that moves us on to progression.
Oh boy.
And the progression, let me tell you, this is. I mentioned earlier we were going to talk about the bigger fucky wuckies. This is it. This is the start of the big fucky wucky. If you want to hear the more positive stuff related to the game, I suggest you stop listening now, because I have nothing nice to say about the progression. The progression system is a fucking joke. The way it works is you play with a class. And you have to keep in mind, classes and weapons within specific classes have limits. So, for example, a team can have 4 snipers. However, the default gun, which has a scope, only one person on the team of the 4 snipers can use that. And when you level the sniper loadout to the maximum level, you'll get the unlock of a scoped rifle from the other team, a captured variant, so to speak, right? So, which only one person can use as well. So, at best, 2 of the 4 snipers will be able to use a scoped rifle. The other 2 will be forced to make do with non-scoped variants. And similar goes for other stuff. So, for example, only 2 people that are like I think like 7 people can be an assault. However, only 2 of
Hmm.
them can actually use the Madsen / the Villa Perosa. And only like 2 of them can use the whatever specific pistol the class has for their faction. It's kind of annoying because it means you can work your ass off to unlock something and then not get it because you just didn't load in fast enough, sweetheart. Unfortunate. How sorry for you. It's kind of the same bullshit as you might see in Rising Storm 2, except in Rising Storm 2 you have everything unlocked by default, and here you can spend tens of hours to like get stuff loaded, like unlocked. It is horrible. So how it works is you basically just play a class and you level it up. You know, everything you do gives you XP. When you get enough XP, you unlock stuff. When you level up, and when you level up, you get something new. Except that's not really the case, because this game has a severe fucking lack of content. And when I say severe lack of content, I mean the following. Say you are an assault. A lot of people see the assault and probably will want to play it because it's got the Villa Perosa, which people will remember from Battlefield 1's elite class to be really fucking cool and really good, and the Madsen, which history nerds will no doubt jerk themselves over because the Madsen is every history nerd's darling machine gun. Here's the problem. When you start off as the assault, you have nothing but a bolt-action rifle. So the assault, which is supposed to be like a charge-in, trench-clearing bastard class, CQC specialist, starts off with nothing but a bolt action, and you get a canteen, which gives you less suppression and infinite stamina for a short period of time, which is somewhat useful. Don't get me wrong, but trench clearing in a bolt action is then you level up, and you level up to level 2, and when you level up to level 2, you get a set of missions. You have to kill 5 enemies with a bayonet, and you have to kill 20 enemies that are less than 10 meters away from you. So here you go. Okay, well, whatever. So you'll do it, and what you'll get is you'll get a perk. As I mentioned earlier, the loadout system is based on a more modular, like battlefieldy loadout system, and you can now choose your perks, which you couldn't in previous games. So you get a new perk, and you unlock fragmentation grenades. Fantastic. The problem is that after this, you then level up to level 3, and you get nothing. And you level up to level 4, and you get nothing. Because this game has 20 levels per class to level through, and it takes a while to level through them. Oh, it takes a while. In a about was it 2.5 hour session, I think, I managed to of abusing the AI, horribly abusing the poor bastards. As an officer, I leveled up about 6 times, and I'm not particularly good. I admit that. However, you can absolutely expect, and I've had people mention that they've took tens of hours to unlock the Madsen for the assault, for example. So you can absolutely expect to take quite a while unlocking stuff unless you're really good at the game. Um, and you have 20 levels to go through, and every few levels, and I mean every few levels, because the only levels where you unlock anything new out of the 20 are level 2, 5, 10, 15, 18, and 20, which means there's twice a gap of 5 fucking levels between anything new. And I mean anything new. Not even a perks in between then. I'm not talking only when you unlock new guns. I'm talking anything. Those 80 like you can go for 5 levels without anything unlocking, and then when you finally unlock something, have it be a useless perk and a knife. And of course, to get those unlocks, you need first to, because this is the thing for every level up that gives you any new unlocks, you have to do a mission. And a lot of the time, the mission itself is is unlocks you something you unlock something related to the mission. The problem is that it kind of makes a perk pointless or an unlock pointless when you already had to do it. For example, for a sniper level up at I think around 15 or 10, you have a new perk that lets you hold your breath twice as long. You go, wow, that's cool. How do you unlock it after leveling up? You have to kill 3 people in one breath 20 times. Frankly, if I can kill 3 people in one breath 20 times, I struggle to see how being able to hold my breath for longer is at all fucking useful. Anyway, back to the assault level up, because it kind of assault specifically is the best at highlighting this. The game not only has an issue with content and what's unlocked when, and the missions being and the fact that you not only have to grind for a long time, you then also need to do a stupid mission set to unlock what you grinded for. It also has a problem of veteran players being way more fucking powerful than new players. And I don't mean slightly. Oh, they have slightly better ADS time on the same gun. Oh no, that would be fine, frankly. I'm talking about the fact that the perks and equipment available to them is hysterically overpowered compared to what they start off with. I mentioned earlier the assault starts off with nothing but a bolt action and a canteen. At level 2, you already have a grenade. At level 5, you'll unlock a semi-automatic pistol, which, yes, compared to a bolt-action rifle, is far, far, far worse at range, but it makes you an absolute monstrosity at close range, because the pistols in the World War One game series have always been incredibly good. Always. And the Beretta Modelo 1915 and the Steyr Hahn are no exception. They're really, really fucking good. And a level 1 assault compared to a level 5 one is already a huge difference in effectiveness. And then you'll move up even higher level. And at level 15, you'll unlock the Villa Perosa and the Madsen. And those two things, especially the Villa Perosa, are horrifyingly strong. They're comically powerful. And then you level up further at level 20, you get grenades. Arguably better grenades, for example. So if you compare at level 18, at level 20 you just get a captured bolt action rifle from the other faction. How exciting. No, the point is, for example, that a level 18 compared to a level 1 assault, for example, the level 1 assault will have pretty pointless perk combined with a canteen and a bolt action rifle. A level 18 assault will have a Matsen or a Villa Perosa, the ability with fragmentation grenades, 2 of them, and a perk that will either mean that he causes 4 times the suppression effect on the enemies, or he can have a 50% faster aim down sights time and a few other perks available, which is he can also take twice or thrice as long. That's a perk. It takes you way longer to bleed out in case you get shot and you don't die. The game now has a bandaging system, um, and this basically lets you to run around, be a menace before having to bandage for longer. It's quite insane, and the level progression is, I mean, the leveling itself I really dislike because of, in part because of the mission set, um in part because of how much you have to grind in order to actually get stuff unlocked. I would have a lot less problem with this if it had, say, 10 levels and every level gave you something new, or 5 levels and every level was like a significant unlocked significant amount of new content for you or whatever. Having 20 levels where only 6 of them actually give you anything is a joke, and the fact that you then also have to do a mission, which oftentimes isn't difficult, is just incredibly obnoxious, like killing 75 enemies with a machine gun. It's not hard, or killing 100 enemies with grenades or a mortar. Again, that's the two missions you need to do to unlock at level 20 for the captured bolt action rifle of the other class, if for the assault class, or the other faction for the assault class. Sorry, and none of these are hard. It just takes time. It's just annoying, and it's like it's just I just don't like it. I think that either they should have gone with just the missions or just the XP and have the XP be lower. Having both of those is a joke. It's almost as horrendously terrible as the progression system in Battlefield 1, where you had to level up a class to unlock a variant of a gun, and then you had to level up your overall class to unlock some bullshit currency to buy one of the things you unlocked. So you had to grind to unlock something, to grind to be able to actually use the thing. And it's kind of the same here, where you grind your ass off for the XP to get a new class level, and then you also have to grind your ass off on the fucking missions, which are just stupid and just wasting your time basically multiple times. And a lot of the time they don't even have any proper synergy between for the game mode. For example, for the officer, the very first mission to unlock a semi-automatic pistol is, instead of the default revolver, is place 5 columns or objectives. Except the problem is, if you're, for example, defending and the enemies aren't pushed up anywhere near your objectives yet, you literally have to, and you want to do the mission, you have to do what I did, which was I was calling in smoke barrages on my own friendly objectives with no enemies anywhere near them. Because I couldn't unlock the pistols otherwise. It's stupid. It makes
Yeah,
abs.
the big problem with the challenges is basically that a lot of them don't make you a team player, but like instead force you to do stuff that's not even remotely helping your team. Like sometimes the machine gun mission, for example, sometimes promotes you to be on a single machine gun the entire match or the entire defense, even though your team might need you on a point or on near a point, but you are in the middle of nowhere firing at, I don't know, bots or people that are unfortunate enough to walk into a machine gun, and you're not really helping out, and it's just really not helping the team with some of these missions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of dumb. The and oft sometimes the missions don't fully work. For example, with the mountaineer, I believe you have binoculars, and which you hold, you look through them, hold down your left mouse button for a bit, like a second and a half or whatever, and it spots enemies in your view, or it's supposed to. So for one of the missions, you have to spot a certain amount of enemies with the binoculars. The problem being, though, that it doesn't really work. So you have 4 enemies in your field of view in the center of the binoculars, maybe even, and only one of them will get spotted, sometimes none, sometimes all. It's very inconsistent and it's really obnoxious, and it's a lot of annoyance. Really, when I was doing it, it was really annoying to get it done. What made me even more annoyed was my only reward for that was the ability to build periscopes, which I can happily say I've never fucking used before. I got flare guns, which were useful, admittedly, and the ability to build periscopes. And frankly speaking, I've never used periscopes, and flare guns are useful, but um, considering that the Mountaineer specifically later on unlocks a trumpet, which for himself and the people in his range make it so that he has Wait, am I talking wrong? No, I'm not.
The Mountaineer,
Okay, I'm
the
right. I'm
Mountaineer
correct. The
has
Mountaineer gets a
the
trumpet. Yes, I'm not wrong.
yeah.
The Mountaineer gets a trumpet later on at level 18 because fuck you and for trying to have fun. But yeah, you can have a trumpet which for the Mountaineer that blows it and for people around them give him what was it, like increased rate of movement speed and increased reload speed and increased bolt like
Rate of fire.
rate of fire.
Um, Or
Uh,
well, bolting speed, not rate of fire, but
yeah,
bolting speed.
and reload speed. It's really, really strong. And the fact the Mountaineer also has a perk that increases his base movement speed, and it stacks, and it's hilarious, and it's a lot of fun. But it kind of brings up to why would the fuck would I ever want to have a perk that lets me build periscopes? If anything, they should. I mean, if anything, they should make it so that you can just build periscopes by default. Period. But like, yeah, the part of the problem with the progression is that the perks themselves and the weapons are really unbalanced, and it kind of leads, and the equipment is really unbalanced. So, um, it's a lot of effort to get stuff unlocked, and I mean, you can spin it to say that when you unlock something, you're rewarded for it. But my counter argument would be anyone that isn't like grinding his nuts off is basically shooting themselves in the leg, and any newbies are completely screwed over because a level 20 rifleman can carry 6 rifle grenades and 2 fragmentation grenades. And the level 1 rifleman has just a bolt action rifle without the grenades and without the rifle grenade, which is
The rifleman like only has like I think one grenade, but besides
no,
the point,
he
yeah,
gets
the
2 because he can equip a perk that doubles his rifle grenade and grenade capacity. So a
oh right,
level
it
1
also doubles the
rifle,
grenade
yes.
capacity.
So a level 1 rifleman has just a bolt action rifle. A level 20 rifleman has 8 explosives, and they refill every time he dies, which is
Yep.
totally fine and balanced and okay to have. And yeah, oh
And it should also be mentioned about the rifle grenades and the perk, that the rifle grenades are limited, but there's only a limit of 2, I remember, for each for
yes,
like one rifle grenade rifle. The
and you
problem
can
is
have
there's two rifle grenade rifles, so
yes,
basically they captured one from the other side. So you end up with 24 rifle grenades at the same time potentially.
potentially, and under 8 fragmentation grenades. So at worst, you can be facing 32 explosives just from
Yeah,
those 4 people,
and just from riflemen. That's
just
not
from
even
those
counting like
4.
assaults or anything else
And
that might have been
assaults,
around.
I believe it's assaults at least, can build grenade replenishment
Yeah, they
crates.
can build the grenade crates. Yeah, that refill. I don't remember if they refill rifle grenades, but they definitely refill normal grenades, as the name suggests.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a shit show. The progression system is genuinely something that uh, the developers missed the mark so fucking bad they killed the neighbor's dog. Um, Unfortunately, it's not the end of the issues. Unfortunately, the progression isn't the only part where the developers really dropped the ball. So earlier mentioned we had 6 maps, which is absolutely not really enough, especially for a 30 to 60-year-old title. Here's the problem: there's not really many guns either. Um, I mentioned the progression system means that you can take tens of hours to unlock some of like the higher level unlocks, which is for a single class, which is absolutely a piss take, and is like like free to play progression system without the microtransactions to skip the grind. But the problem is that you're not really grinding for anything. Like, yeah, you have your perks and shit, of course, but you're looking at 26 guns, and that's including the heavy machine guns. Without including the heavy machine guns, and only counting the revolvers and pistols and bolt action rifles in the game, because this game doesn't have semi-automatic rifles, but semi-automatic rifles or shotguns, by the way. Um, So just counting the stuff that you can, use in the loadout screen, if you will, it's 22 guns. Uh, like different guns. I'm not gonna count the copy pasta, captured variant whoop-de-doo, because it's an M95 used by the Austro-Hungarians is the exact same fucking gun, even if you equip it as an Italian. It doesn't count as a separate weapon. Sorry. Um,
Yeah, and stuff like grenades and rifle grenades, I'd also more see as like equipment things, but like not common weapons you are constantly using.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't count. I'm not counting those either because like if we were gonna be counting slightly different setups, then fucking squad's got the most weapons of any game I've ever fucking seen because because then you can have say that the American army gets 12 different guns because you have an M4A1 with holographic sight and one with an ACOG and one with a vertical grip and iron sights and one with foregrip and holo sight. Like it doesn't fucking matter. It's the same gun. You get something else extra attached to it, so I'm not gonna count it. So we're not counting it in the video, and thus we are at the number of 22 rifles, and frankly, 30 to 60 euro for 22 rifles is a fucking piss take. And that is counting, I should mention, various carbines and variations of a gun, because, like, Vitelli Vitali 1870-87 and a Vitelli Vitali 1870 8715 are fundamentally visually very fucking similar because they're the same gun, except the model 1870s-87 uses a 3-round clip and is black powder, so has slightly different stats.
Yeah, 4-round clip, but yeah, basically,
Sorry.
it's basically visually the same gun, but like it's a black powder rifle.
So it
So
does slightly more smoke when you shoot in
yeah,
third
not
person.
even in third person. In first person, not even, because I recently checked it
Yeah.
again, and you really don't notice it in first person. So you don't notice if you made a screenshot of both rifles and showed it to someone, he wouldn't be able to immediately tell which is which.
Also, that's
So it's
kind of
basically same gun.
yeah, and also again, it's counting carbines. So a Kakana Muschetto Modelo and a Kakana M91 TS, for example. And similarly, it's counting uh, uh, the Repetierstutzen M1895 and just the M1895 rifle and stuff like that.
Yeah, the carbines get like a slight buff in rate of fire,
but
but
lower
that's about it.
damage. They get lower damage and muzzle velocity over penetration whatever because shorter barrel but faster to fire. They are visually they're different and gameplay wise they're different, but you know it's it's
It's still the same rifle but shorter, basically.
it's a similar rifle at its core. So counting it as a different weapon, yeah, we will, but it's not it's not the same as an M4 versus an MP5 in a video game. Like visually the distinction and stuff just isn't quite the same. But yeah, and on that note, the game has other weapon mechanic related issues.
Yeah, there's been a few issues weapon mechanic wise that have been in the previous games, and they haven't really much been improved. For example, a small thing, perhaps for many, but for me it's an annoyance because people often complain about explosive in games, like grenades, mainly. And sometimes games actually do things that balance grenades out better than some people might realize. For example, being able to throw a grenade back helps a lot, in my opinion. Battlefield 5 did it, for example. Battlefield 5 sadly also did reduce grenade damage, so they're a bit too much nerfed, but still, the spirit is there. You get it. Throwing grenades back, it counters the explosives, and so people might have to take a risk because they have to walk up to it, but it's the counters the explosive. Rise of Storm 2, it does stuff like proper audio for the grenades. What I mean with that is you can actually audibly tell where the grenade landed, like perfectly. I could maybe not a beginner player, but like someone who has some hours in the game can perfectly tell you where a grenade landed, and sometimes the sound is even that good that you can even tell which grenade is that landed, like enemy grenade, a friendly grenade, even a smoke grenade or something. This game, uh, it improves on the previous games by letting you know that a grenade landed. That's an improvement because in the previous games you basically couldn't tell. You suddenly there was an explosion and you went like, wait, there was a grenade? Oh. In this game you can tell, okay, there's a grenade. Where? you don't know. Another problem for some reason, or for some people, maybe it's just something you have to get used to, is that the grenade timers are off. What I mean by that is we are used to like 4.5, 5-second grenade timers. In this game, they're 7 to 8 seconds. So a grenade lands next to you, and you don't know where. You can't really tell. You couldn't throw it back even if you knew where it is. And then you either are really unlucky because the guy timed the grenade, or you have this odd situation where you have to account for something for potentially up to, I don't know, 7 seconds that's just waiting to kill you. And that's weird, I guess. So the grenade mechanics, I don't. There's potential for improvement. Um, Another thing, I'm going to mention the minor stuff like grenades, and before I get to guns. So beforehand, melee. I don't like what they did with the melee. In previous games, people who might have played like Verdun or Tannenberg know that on a melee attack, you get stuck onto an enemy, it's one hit kill, and okay, that's it. What I mean with stuck is like your camera focuses on the enemy. In this game, this has been amplified, and it feels just off. You are focused way too long on an enemy, and the melee feels way too long, and there isn't even any special animation for the enemy who's getting stabbed. So he might even be walking around dragging your camera while other enemies place their rifles on your head. And there's just other games that did this better. I would mention World at War, like Call of Duty World at War, that did this perfectly. You are also focused with your camera on a character with a bayonet attack, but the character plays a special animation, and also the character is completely stopped dead in his tracks. He's not moving around anymore, so it feels good. It's maybe not the best gameplay wise because you are still like stuck with your bayonet and in a camera in a single position, waiting for an animation to end, but it just feels better than this movement. If you wanted a more recent example, Battlefield 1 with its executions um, also did this with like first person animations. I know some developers don't have the budget for it, but World at War, we can probably put a clip of it up, how it looks, because not many people know, and looking it up is a nightmare, trust me. I'd like make my own recordings for this before to show people how it looks, and they liked it. Um, but we can probably put it up. Anyways, that shouldn't be too difficult to do, to animate. It's like 2 or 3 variations of a character animation, getting stabbed, and that's it. Not much, but it works. Yeah.
Oh, real
Uh,
quick, maybe to mention, the developers are quite a lot been talking about how they're trying to make the weapons and stuff be as authentic as possible and as realistic as possible. And in that regard, the grenades you mentioned, they have a 7 second fuse. People might think that's like way too long because they're used to Call of Duty and Squad and Battlefield and stuff, where grenades are usually 2 to 3 seconds. 7 seconds actually realistic for those grenades. We looked it up. No idea why the fuck it was designed with 7 seconds, but there you go. 7 seconds actually realistic, but it brings up a different question, which I'm sure Killwolf will mention slightly later down the line, of when of kind of the strange times where the devs are like, yeah, we want to be as realistic as possible, even if it means making something worse, and then other times where they like on purpose bend this we trying to make this as authentic and realistic as possible rule for balancing purposes.
yeah. I could go into that a bit later.
Oh,
Yes,
go into this later. I'm just mentioning
I
because of the
kind of jumped a
grenades.
bit with the mechanics, I think, because I should probably also. But you touched on it slightly with the weapon amount, with how little we have. And people might go, because I hear this fairly often in discussions of like people who are not that much into the pre-Cold War time periods, like World War II, World War One, and even before. And people often mention like there weren't that many weapons, or say that there isn't that many weapons because they see the same or they imagine the same bolt actions, same three bolt actions for they know like everyone knows the Lee Enfield, everyone knows the Libelle, everyone knows the Springfield. But people forget that this period, especially prior to World War One and interwar years, also um, was a big time experimentation and figuring stuff out and variations and trying new concepts and getting other things to work. So the amount of weapons is definitely there. Um, for an authentic game, maybe less because, of course, including just prototypes like Battlefield 1 did would be a bit silly, but still, the amount is there and definitely researchable. For example, we could have analogs to certain weapons. What I mean by that is the Italians obviously get the Villa Barossa, which is a submachine gun. Okay, the Austrians get a Madsen, which is a light machine gun. But in theory, you could just as well get the Italians a light machine gun with either the Perino or the Shosha. I know people will probably bring up or mention that wait, the Shosha is a French gun. The French were kind of involved in the Italian front and gave weapons to the Italians, so the Shosha showing up wouldn't be too far fetched. Similarly, the Austro-Hungarians could, as a submachine gun, get Steyr M1912-16, which is basically just the M1912 in full auto with an extended magazine and
The
a shoulder
Steyerhahn.
stock.
People will know it in
Steyerhahn.
game as the Steyerhahn. Yes.
Yeah, it's also been in like the full auto variant has also been in like Battlefield 1, so people should probably know it. There's also a perfect analog to the Villa Barossa, which is the Sturmpistole, which is basically the same thing but with in a different caliber. And like I said, it would be a perfect analog. It's slightly different visually, and it would probably also help with the balancing. Uh, so you don't end up with a situation where I don't know where you end up in a balancing nightmare where one side only has this type of weapon and the other side only has this type of weapon. Like if you think back to I don't know Verdun, for example. Yes, the only one side had a submachine gun, but the other side had an automatic to counter that submachine gun or something to counter it, basically. And the Madsen and developer also don't really counter each other. They do different roles and have different strengths and
Well, they're
eh.
supposed to. They're supposed to have different strengths and different roles, realistically
Yeah, they're
speaking.
supposed to, but yeah,
Develop
we
Barossa's
should
just.
we'll mention it. We will
Oh,
mention that later. We're not going to go over balancing yet because yeah, but like also for analogs, there could be more revolvers, especially and other stuff as well that could be reused from previous games. Like people might mention, okay, but that's all fine and dandy that all these weapons exist, but you would have to make the assets. That's annoying. That takes time. That's resource intensive. Yeah, kinda. But the problem is you might just as well reuse some stuff from the previous games that didn't make in this game. Like I mentioned, the Italians used French weapons supplied to them, so that could be reused from Verdun. The Austro-Hungarians could as well as the Italians could use the C96. Well, the Italians would need a different model for it, but the Australians definitely could like reuse the C96 from previous games, which or some of the Mauser rifles from the previous games, the Gewehr 98, for example, which was supplied by the Germans. So there is potential for more weapons there, definitely. Um, yeah, could probably make a cut here.
because yeah. So besides the stuff you mentioned, you also have other kind of. This would be like a bunch of additional content, but as far as the content we do have, there's still like a bunch of things that could be improved. For example, the rifle grenades. Personally, I'm really not a fan because the animations themselves are kind of stiff. But besides that, the bigger problem with them, for example, is there's no real way to aim them. And I think like at all. You don't. You basically hip fire them, and there's no real indicator of how the grenades are gonna travel, like which path they're gonna take, where they're gonna land. You don't even have at least. I don't know if it was an issue with the game or what, but I didn't even have like a crosshair that would tell me where the center ish of my screen is or anything. So my experience with the rifle grenades was that I really couldn't hit them where I wanted to hit them. Now I'm sure with a lot of practice that can be fixed, but that's still not really an excuse for not having any sort of aiming whatsoever. I'm not saying you need to have like a big old ladder, super accurate ladder crosshair like a more arcadey title or a 3D like highlighted line in the world that shows you the exact path of the grenade, like uh
The
the
Battlefield did
grenades
that
of
for mortars and for
yes,
also for the one
Piat
rifle
or whatever.
for the Piat. They did it for the Piat. If you aim it up, it shows up on your map where they exactly
Yeah,
where the grenade will land.
see that would be fine, a little map, because there is a map in the game, so having a little map highlight wouldn't be bad. Or having something really really like, I recently downloaded Screaming Steel mod for Day of Infamy. Fucking gorgeous, fantastic, love it to bits. In that game, when you load up a rifle grenade, you use the front, so the left arm that's holding the gun, the front part of the gun. Actually, the soldier sticks out his thumb a bit, so you're aiming with the thumb. When you ADS, the thumb kind of acts as like a rough marker of where about ish the rifle grenade will go. So then, depending on the range, you aim slightly lower, slightly higher than the thumb, whatever. But that's the important part, is that you kind of have this reference image, and you don't have that at all in Isonzo, and I really, really don't like it because it makes the rifle grenades feel less effective and a lot more clunky than they should honestly feel. Even just letting me use the rear sights on my gun, even if it would be entirely blocked by the rifle grenade, would be fine because I don't need a clear image, like picture or whatever. I just need some sort of fucking reference of where about am I aiming, for God's sake. Because
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I could even I could even like do with just a little zoom or something because I'm really it's really ingrained in my mind where the center of my monitor is. But like anything, it would be better than just hip firing it because hip firing feels just weird. Like the thing with this slight zoom, aside from the feel, would also be that your sensitivity might potentially change and you could actually adjust more, could adjust better. While if you're just hip firing, your mouse is still at the normal speed, and it just feels weird to adjust with that. Like it feels like you're basically hip firing a bolt action rifle and trying to hit with that, and adjusting with that, and just doesn't feel right.
yeah, and there's also like other annoyances related to, which kind of go against the whole um we want to be as realistic, authentic as possible. One example which you've mentioned to me before is the way clips and reloading clips works in real life versus in game.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that's definitely a thing that was also a thing in the previous games. Like probably a lot of people know it only from these games that a clip-loaded rifle, like if I say clip-loaded, I mean en-block clip. So there's basically a package of ammunition that's loaded into the rifle and stays in the rifle and is ejected when the rifle is empty, or well, when we will get into that, but you basically imagine a clip that holds the rounds like a magazine, but it's not a magazine. It's just
an M1 Garand. An
like an
M1
M1 Garand.
Garand
Yeah,
uses an M
basically, that's a good
block.
example. Yeah,
There you go.
an M1 Garand uses the clip system, and the thing is, in the previous games, these weapons you couldn't reload them without the gun being empty. That's not really accurate. I get they probably did it so maybe it's more unique or it's a gameplay thing, but it's not really accurate to real life. For one, you could unload these rifles, like on the Steyr, for example, the M95. You could just open the bolt, press a button, and the clip will jump out.
Yeah, it
That's
just
it.
ejects. It literally just yeets the entire end block, just phew, and it's out.
Yep.
And with some other guns, you could top up end block clips while they were
Funny
in the
enough,
gun.
the not related to Isonzo, but the Grand also has this button. So when people notice probably from older games that there was only like you couldn't reload the Grand, in theory you could. You could just open the bolt, press the button, and the clip jumps out. Yeah, and this system carried on into Isonzo, and I think it's just really outdated, to be honest. I get they probably don't have they might not have the animators to do like I don't know, another variation, even though that would be weird because it's just another reload. Like 2 reloads in total isn't much to be expected of a modern shooter for like a single gun. But there's also the game also doesn't consider that the clip when the clip ejects, because the way it works is the clip can fall out the bottom of the rifle. This end block clip on most of these rifles, Kakano M95. And this would happen basically on your last round when you chamber your last round. So you would have one shot remaining, but the clip is already fallen out of the rifle, which sadly the game doesn't even give you a feedback of. Like you don't hear the clip falling on the ground, which is a missed opportunity in my opinion. But I guess it's not. That's not a gameplay issue. The gameplay issue is you still can't reload the rifle. In theory, you could just open the bolt and the remaining round would be ejected by that, and that's enough. You can insert a new clip. Not in the game. You still have to fire the last shot, and only then you can reload. Which, eh, maybe they did it for consistency, but it's not. It's just not accurate. That's for a game series that like really credits themselves with weapon accuracy. That's a detail I kinda would like to see with a newer title. I get they probably didn't do it in the older games because, well, the older games didn't even have like a second reload animation for when your gun is empty, when your gun isn't empty. Sorry. For like when you reload in 911, for example, the slide always locks back, and you always have like the 7 round capacity instead of a +1 you get in like other games. So yeah, similarly, this issue still exists also for some pistols. Like some pistols are also clip loaded, and you still can't like there's no proper way to single load them. Funny enough, there is one pistol that can, which is the Steyr again, because it could in Tannenberg. But in this game,
There's one bolt action rifle that can actually. It's the
oh
Vitelli
no,
Vitali black powder variant. Yeah.
the stripper clip using bolt action rifles, they can do it all.
Yes.
They
There's
have a few.
one
There's also the Gewehr 88/05 or 05,
in.
which is
Oh yeah.
also triple clip loaded, and you can also single load that one. So that's
Good point.
there.
Good point.
But
Good point.
I was specifically talking about like pistols because some of the pistols are clip loading, and you still can't single load them, which is weird because one of the pistols can. A bit
Yeah.
inconsistent,
Yeah.
which is probably a word we're going to hear a lot
Yeah.
when
Inconsistency is
when we
an
get to
absolute.
stuff like animation and sound.
Yeah. The consistency as well. I think this is actually a good time we mention the fact that the VP, right?
Oh yeah, the elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room that I've actually had arguments with the devs about, the Villa Perosa, and other people on the server about. I've had multiple arguments related to it. The Villa Perosa in Isonzo, you'll play it and you'll go, wow, this thing fucking shoots. 25-round mag, gone like that. Its rate of fire is about 800 RPM in game, and it's got 2 barrels, so when you deploy the bipod and you can use both barrels at once, it goes up to 1600. Here's the big fucky wucky. 1600 RPM is slightly faster than what a single barrel on the VP should actually be firing, because in reality, the Villa Perosa is a submachine gun, yes, but it was designed to be mounted on planes. Its rate of fire is fucking jacked. Its rate of a single barrel has rate of fire of about 1,000 to 1,500 RPM. Two of them about 2 to 3,000 RPM. So the fact that this thing's shooting at 800, oh sorry, it's 1,200 to 1,500. My bad, not 1,000. It's 1,200 to 1,500 RPM. That's the real life rate of fire. So the Velote Perosa in Isonzo is actually firing about 50% slower than what it should be. And this was done for balancing purposes. However, I've had arguments that if a gun is so fucking terrible, you have to basically make a different gun. With your with fantasizing about stats, then A, pick a different gun, or B, put it in the game as it fucking is, even if it's kind of shit. But of course, the devs don't care. They decided that they really want the Villa Perosa, and they're going to kind of bullshit about being as authentic as possible when it suits them, like in this case. Which kind of brings up that really weird question of why the fuck do you have 7-second fuse grenade times, which are really weird and to play with and against. And the grenades would absolutely probably feel better with shorter fuses.
Yeah, definitely.
If you then but you're gonna keep that for realism, but then you're gonna go with the Villa Perosa having way too slower to fire and the Madsen kicking like a fucking mule, um, making them making neither of them really feel good or realistic. And the Villa Perosa is just not realistic and it's ridiculously overpowered, and the Madsen is just too kicks way too much for it to be of much use, frankly, and it's just not really comfortable, at least for me personally, because of the visual recoil. Um, It's just a bizarre decision, I think.
Okay. So another thing, like the Villa Perosa, just the balancing with the Madsen doesn't work out. Like one would imagine, one is really good at close range, one is really good at like medium to long range. This game has some longer ranges, so the potential is there. The problem is the Villa Perosa just performs really well at long ranges as well, because the volume of fire is just there to fill this role. Like, yeah, the damage drop off might cause some of your hits to not immediately kill someone, but if you land a headshot, the guy is dead. And if you could just fire enough bullets, the guy is also going to die. So the gun is pretty much more effective than the actual machine gun at long range sometimes. And there's also the weird notion that people have like he mentioned that the rate of fire change was done for balancing purposes. Some people might believe, wait, okay, why would a slower rate of fire be better? Because they are used to other games where like higher rate of fire means strong gun. The thing is, the gun, or well, it should actually recoil a lot. Like the Villa Perosa, if you look up videos of it, like Ian from Forgotten Weapons shooting it, or if you find that one clip of the actual real gun, like an old black and white recording of it shooting, the gun has an absolutely horrendous recoil. And the higher rate of fire would actually decreases the effectiveness. And I'd say that would actually make it more balanced. Um, because while yes, you have a lot of volume of fire, it's also over pretty quickly. And like if the guy dies in like zero point 0.1 millisecond or 0.2 milliseconds in a game that has like a really fast CTK, doesn't really matter in my opinion. And it counts in Battlefield, but in this game it really isn't like a factor with the CTK. It's more a factor with like how fast you expend ammo, how much the gun recoils, and the recoil should also be configurable by the devs anyway. So the rate of fire that could be adjusted anyways.
Also, yeah. So
So
when you mentioned, sorry, when you mentioned that people might be used to good gun, higher to fire, people are probably used to like Battlefield 5, Battlefield 1, Modern Warfare, where generally speaking, higher to fire guns have low damage, and Siege as well and stuff. Higher to fire guns tend to have lower damage per shot. Like in Battlefield 3, for example, the MP7, 950 RPM, 20 maximum damage, 10 minimum damage, compared to assault rifles that were, I think, 25 maximum and 16.5 minimum. the difference with this game is that TTK, while it does have a slightly lower damage, generally speaking, the shots to kill are in with most weapons between 1 and 3 maximum 4. So it having higher to fire wouldn't actually increase its wouldn't actually make its TTK much lower because it's already super low to begin with. However, having a higher to fire would make it a lot more difficult to use because you'd have to manage your ammunition a lot more and a lot better, and you'd have to fall back to your grenades or secondary weapons like melee weapons a lot faster, basically.
Or rely on teammates who can like resupply with you with ammunition.
Yes. Basically, yeah.
Both automatics for both sides just feel off. Like we will get into like sounds later, but and animations, but yeah, for balancing and for the feel, just the normal the feel, it's just I don't like it. I don't like either, to be honest.
Because yeah, the sounds on the Villaparos and the Manson and some of the other weapons are really not very good. I mean, the weapons from what we've heard and seen and stuff is like ranges from really alright, like the Vendel. The Vendel sounds fantastic. But then you have stuff like the Repetierstützen, which is horrible, and you have stuff like the Steilhahn, which doesn't sound the worst, but it sounds a lot worse than it does in previous entries because a lot of the weapons are returnees from previous World War I game series games.
Yeah.
And for the Villaparos and the Madsen, I mean, I don't know. The Madsen has, you mentioned that it has a really inconsistent cycling sound or whatever.
Oh
Like,
yeah, that's something I mentioned in the to the devs a few times, and I don't think they ever attempted to fix it. The firing sound really doesn't. If I just say it doesn't feel right, people probably won't know, so we can actually just show
yeah,
it.
we'll show it, of course. But basically, to describe it, it's kind of like
It feels like the
once,
gun is slowing down and speeding up while firing.
yeah,
Uh,
and I
it doesn't feel like a gun firing, but like if I
it
don't know,
doesn't it
know
doesn't
how,
really
how to
feel
describe
right.
it.
Yeah, the way I ran into a similar problem. I made an Armored Warfare sound mod. Armored Warfare, just a multiplayer tank game. Don't worry about it. But like I made a sound mod for it, and I kind of ran into a similar problem where I had one of the sounds that didn't quite match the mixing of other sounds. It kind of ended up with the same effect where um, when firing, a longer burst, that one shot really stood out and kind of made the gun not really, or the tank water cannon, not really quite sound and feel right. And it's kind of like the same style feel here, where because of I guess like when the sounds whatever is a bit oddly mixed, just kind of sounds off, and because of that, it kind of gives off a weird feeling as if the gun is has an inconsistent rate of fire instead of a steady rate of fire as it should have.
Yeah, that's probably it. Um, too much variation in their like multiple sounds. Yeah, basically that. And they didn't really change it, even though I mentioned it. I guess maybe they didn't understand, or maybe they didn't care, or most
I
likely
mean,
their sound engineer just never showed up to work again because
the funny, but I mean, whatever it
because
was, whatever the reasoning for it, be it a bug or conscious decision, uh, whatever
the
it
sound
is,
itself
the sound
isn't good
itself
either.
isn't particularly good, and the gun doesn't sound particularly right. And at the end of the day, for players, the only thing that matters is that last part. It doesn't matter. The why and the how doesn't really matter. But
Yeah.
the gun doesn't really sound good, and that's an issue considering it's supposed to be the main target gun, if you will, for that specific class. The Villapros and the Matzner, like for the assault, are like the end goal weapons, really.
Yeah, it's basically developer also basically is even bigger than that, being a big like representation. I'd say it's almost the first time in a video game. Like I know Battlefield 1918, the mod has one, and
Battlefield
of
1
course
has it for
Battlefield 1
the Elite.
Battlefield 1 claims to have one, but theirs is like a weird movie mashup. It's not the actual like real gun. And yeah, so that's kind of a first, and which ties in again to the what we said about the rate of fire not being accurate, which is a shame because we still don't have an accurate portrayal of that gun then. And I also just don't like the firing sound of it in this game. It's like in Battlefield 1,
Yeah.
granted, the rate of fire also wasn't like completely accurate, but it really sounded more accurate.
It sounded like, yeah, as it should. By the way, the Battlefield 1 Villa Perosa Model 1915 is based off of the Vapian Co. mock-up, which was made for the 1987 film The Sicilian. So
Yeah.
that's the reasoning why. Also, in real life, the Villa Perosa could apparently have a stock, which we don't have in Isonzo, interestingly enough.
The stock, that's an interesting story because from a other researcher friend, I kind of know the stock is an Austrian invention. So
Uh,
and
uh,
it wouldn't show up on the Italian side. It could have had like some weird setup where you can like fire it from your chest. We can probably show an image of it. But the stock, yeah, that's an Austrian invention. So
I
because they
probably
of
could.
course captured a gun, and I don't know how much the stock was used.
I
Couldn't
don't
tell
know,
you.
but it's an interesting little tidbit, I guess. But yeah, no, the Villa-Perosa Ridify-wise doesn't like that's kind of what threw us off to actually start counting
Yeah,
frames, basically, to realize that the rate of fire wasn't good because in game, I don't think the in-game rate of fire is shown properly. I might be
yeah.
a bit wrong though.
Like even if it's not accurate stat-wise, it could have at least sounded like it. Like the Battlefield One Liberosa is also not accurate fire rate-wise, but it really sounds like it is because the sound just does it justice, and in this game it just doesn't. The firing sound kind of sounds like someone kicking a fucking fence or something.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Funny thing, in Battlefield 1 it apparently has a rate of fire of 900 RPM, so only
yeah,
about 100
exactly.
RPM faster, but it feels a lot more than that. It feels a lot
Yeah,
more than just 100 RPM.
I was kind of surprised when I looked it up again recently that it's not that high, but it actually sounds high. So they did a good job of it. It's probably because it's also two sounds playing and because it's like two barrels firing. I don't know
Yeah,
what they
because
did,
I'm pretty
but
sure the one in
they did it
Battlefield
right.
1, the one in Battlefield 1 has like a link trigger which lets you use both barrels at once while moving around, while Isonzo has the aircraft trigger, which
Yeah,
basically
the
has two small levers you push on to shoot. Not unlike what people are used to seeing on miniguns and stuff in movies and video games. Kind of
and
along the
machine
similar
guns
styles.
basically. Like
Yeah,
it's just a
like
usual
M2,
machine
like
gun
the
pushed
Browning
yeah.
M2, like in
Yeah,
on
yeah,
that you see
stuff like
mounted on
that.
vehicles. It's the same style, except it has two of them, one for each barrel. And while in Isonzo, while you're moving around, you're holding the barrel with one hand, which is a horrible idea, but whatever. And that way you can only shoot one barrel. So the slower the fire, I guess, popped a little bit more because Battlefield 1's shoots always at 1800 RPM, so it's still slightly too slow, but at least it feels higher. Well,
Yeah.
800 RPM. 800 RPM, people think, man, that's really high, but people also seem to forget that you've used a lot of guns at 800 RPM if you've played any real FPS game in the last few, in the last decade and a half, really. M4s and M416s, portrayals, F2000s, all that stuff tends to have a rate of fire of between 7 to 850 RPM. The M249, for example, as well. It's a very common depiction, and that all has a similar rate of fire.
The MP5.
The MP5, as far as submachine guns go, yeah. The MP7, for example, has a higher rate of fire than the Villa Perosa has in Isonzo, and that shouldn't be the case. So, eh. So yeah, I'll show off the recording for the Villa Perosa to the fire and the Madsen, so people can actually see the what we mean with rate of fire, and with the Madsen with the sounds just kind of not quite being right. Unfortunately, people won't really be able to check it themselves because it's unlocked at I think level 15, so you can expect a good, depending on how good you are, I don't know, 5 to 10 to 20 hours. Someone on the Isonzo official was talking about 50 hours or whatever to get to the Madsen, which is fucking lunacy. But he's probably pretty fucking terrible if he needed 50 hours for that relatively little gameplay, all things considered. But yeah, Madsen's kind of off. The Villa feels slow, but unfortunately, it's not. They're not the
gets
worst
worse.
offenders. They're not the worst offenders. I think the worst. Sorry.
The big word with the Isonzo weapon sounds is inconsistency, which we mentioned earlier. And it doesn't it's nowhere near as apparent as with the revolvers, because you have the Bodeo, which sounds great,
Also has pretty good
but
animations.
then you also have the Rastengasser, which is the Austro-Hungarian revolver. Like it has like an 8-shot cylinder, and it just sounds worse.
Yeah, I'll slap the
Then
gasser on so people can actually see what we mean. But
yeah, like the
it's not
Bodeo is
very good.
almost like it's almost like Tannenberg number 3 Russian levels of good, and then you have the Rastengasser, and it's just horrible. And they even use it for like some gameplay footage in a trailer or something, and I don't understand why you would actually fucking show this to people, because it's just so weak in comparison. And it's just
Same issue.
I don't know if they fired their sound designer or something halfway through and just made do with like the old stuff, but changed it for some reason, because it sounds worse than in the previous games, which is also very apparent on the semi-automatic pistols that were part of the previous games. They just sound better.
Steyerhahn specifically sounds a lot worse than Isonzo.
Yeah,
It sounds so people might watch shooting channels and they'll see like people shooting metal targets and they have like a plinking sound, right, when the metal target gets struck. The Steyerhahn kind of feels like they recorded actual gunfire, except instead of standing next to the gun, they were standing next to the target.
Oh, you're thinking of the Rochsteyr,
Oh right, yeah, the Rochsteyr, not the
the
Steyerhahn. My bad.
1907. The Steyerhahn
Yes,
is
the
also
Rochsteyr.
pretty bad, but it's not as bad.
My bad. Rochsteyr. Both Rochsteyrs, close enough, man. Most people won't know the difference. Similarly to the Gasser, where it kind of feels like they have the firing sound, but then they forgot the after effect, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The same problem comes with the German carbine. Not the German, sorry, the Austro-Hungarian like carbine that's used on at least one or two classes can use it. I think it's for the Mountaineer, and I think it's even a default weapon, which is painful. But
Yeah,
the
for the assault, it's the
Steyr,
default.
oh yeah, as well. The Steyr Repetierstützen, model 1895 is just oof.
Yeah, we mentioned it to the developers, but like I said,
No
I don't
words.
know if the audio designer quit or something, because they never changed it.
Well, the animation designer definitely did. We'll
And
talk about that later. It's awful.
yeah, we'll talk about animations. But the sound is worse than in the previous games, and I don't know how they did it.
And it's pretty strange because the Carcano Mosquito is fantastic. It's actually straight up my favorite Carcano depiction in any game, and it improves on Battlefield 1's and 5's Carcanos.
Yeah, the Carcano is fine. The bolt is a bit It's very distinct. The bolt is at least distinct, but the firing sound is just fine. But you can't really say the same about the Austrian rifles because even default the M95 just doesn't sound good. There was one session where we played the Austrians for a bit, and I just got tired of the default rifle and annoyed by this fucking sound.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Not
I
to be
just
fair.
needed the Carcano again.
To be fair, it's not even because of just how bad the sounds were. It's also because no matter which class you picked, it was two
Yeah, it's
guns.
always there. I
It's
always
always two
had
guns. It's the same two guns. The lack of content and variety kills me so bad. Yeah, and it's a default
um
gun. The Gasa as well, same issue. The Gasa is the default weapon for the officer, and it's the
yeah.
only weapon available for some of the other, like the only secondary weapon available for some of the classes as well, I believe. It's just you can't really get rid of it.
Yeah, meanwhile, the Italian pistols all sound fine, I guess. I
Yeah,
wouldn't really say there's any standing out like super bad. They are just fine. But there's one gun standing out for the firing sound. A rifle,
the Vandal.
which you
Is it the
particularly
Vandal?
like.
Is it the Vandal?
It's the Vandal.
Yes, yes. The Vandal is a really fucking cool, like, nice animation in Isonzo as well. A bit stiff, but nice. It's a single shot, like, breech loading gun. It's fucking gorgeous, man. Looks good, sounds fantastic, hits like a truck. It's so much fun. If only more than one person was allowed to use it at one given time. That would be fun. Fun? Like, what the fuck? Ah, it's only available for the marksman, and only
Yeah,
one marksman can use it, and it's only for the Austro-Hungarians. So, in a 48-person match, one person at most will have access to it, will be able to actually use it, and
I
it's a
mean,
fairly late unlock, maybe it's a level 10 unlock or
it's
something.
not like limited like the scoped rifles, but yeah, it's just for the marksman. So
No, it is limited, I'm pretty sure.
no, I'm pretty sure it's not because it's just the
We'll see.
scoped rifles that are
We'll see.
limited.
Fair enough,
I'll
but we'll see.
I'll quickly grab up the screenshot, but it's just the scoped rifles that are limited
Whatever you
for
say.
the
Another
marksman.
pistol. Yeah, another pistol's for the assaulter. Anyway, yeah, Vendel. Mwah. I'll slap a clip of it actually shooting and reloading. The animation is stiff but very nice, and the actual firing sound is gorgeous. And you are correct. I stand corrected.
Yeah,
Still, yeah, Vandal, fan fucking tastic. That's definitely an outlier. And it is a nice outlier to have a single shotgun that actually sounds so nice. SKS, danke vet. Um,
yeah, beyond the wire. Good
um,
work.
but yeah, that's actually that's an example of very positive sound design. I know we've been ragging on the game, but we don't actually hate the game. We just don't like the way they made it, did it dirty, basically. So yeah, besides the Vendel, they also reused some sounds apparently for from like previous
Yeah,
games.
because most of the Austrian guns showed up in the previous games. Some of the sounds got reused and some modified, which, like I said, didn't like for like the semi-automatic pistols, but also other stuff that just didn't get much change. The Gewehr 88 got like the same bolt sound, for example, which is fine, but it's like I think it's been around since Verdun or something, so that might have been a thing they could have actually modernized. I don't know why they had to reuse that one.
I was
But
just
yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
but yeah, I the sounds that just have a big inconsistency issue that like some stuff sounds good to great and other stuff like the Bodeo review I mentioned. I've had some clips during testing where I just, which of course I didn't like release, but I just looked at it afterwards because it felt right with the firing sound and the gameplay. And then other times you have stuff that I absolutely wouldn't want in any game ever, which like the Rasengasa, the Stützen, stuff like that that just annoys me.
Hmm. Unfortunately, they didn't reuse the animations. Jesus fucking Christ! So the animations in Verdun in Tannenberg were always kind of stiff, and that makes
Yeah,
sense. It's a Unity game, started off as a browser game that's made by a few guys on a fucking shoestring budget. It makes sense that it's not Modern Warfare, but frankly, if you're going to be costing people 30 to 60 euro, you better have some fucking quality to back up. And holy shit. Okay, stiffness I can understand, right? I can get around it if the rest of the animation is at least good, and for stuff like the Vandal and most of the bolt action rifles, that's the case. The animations are kind of stiff, but they're fine. They're not
yeah.
great, but they're okay. Not really good enough for a game that's costing as much money as it is and releasing in 2022, in my opinion. But fine, right? Whatever. However, the revolver animations and even more so the pistol animations are
Oh yeah,
fucking
definitely.
horrendous. Like people that play Killing Floor 2 and Payday 2, you'll know some of the latest like newest weapons have been not very good. As far as animations go, yeah, this is basically the level I'm talking about. I'm talking magazine, not in your hand, clipping through your fingers, all that jazz. It's really bad.
Yeah, some really weird key poses, like just complete weirdness in the animations. Like it doesn't feel natural, it doesn't look good, and frankly, I don't know if it's a fair thing to say, but since I'm animating myself sometimes for like modding stuff and yeah, just modding stuff, um, I did a pistol animation recently, and frankly, I don't think I'm that far off from this game. And it should be noted that I'm a complete amateur. Like I'm not claiming to be a professional animator. I'm not ever going to be because it's not my main thing. But in my honest opinion, I'd say I'm pretty close in terms of quality, if it's not even better than some of the pistol reloads.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think your recoil animations aren't as good as, for example, the Isonzo ones, but the real animation was a lot better from what you showed me. Because, yeah, I mentioned Screaming Steel before, and I'll bring it up again because I think that it's a pretty good example of a lot of time, passion, work gone into a game that doesn't have any players and on a free mod. Um, and frankly, Screaming Steel. So it's like so in that sense, so the perfect circumstances for where you'd actually expect there to be some shoddy work done on stuff like animations. I wouldn't blame them if Screaming Steel had really crap animations, frankly, right? Small mod team for a dead game that is making a completely free mod. Sure. No, I have a recording of it. I'll slap it in. The Screaming Steel Frommerstab is gorgeous. Like, the animation is really, really good. It's smooth. It's not stiff at all. There's no clipping. It's just a really nice and just nice to look at reload animation. And the sounds are as well. And frankly, the Isonzo from Stop is horrible. And if you put them side to side and said one's from a 30 to 60 euro game, one's from a free mod for a Source Engine game, I would very much hope that the Screaming Steel from a stop would be the one that's in a paid game, but it isn't. It isn't. It's a really nice animation, and it's just not in the free mod, and Isonzo's isn't, and Isonzo's and the problem is this isn't one gun. The reloads on the gas. I'll show a bunch of clips while talking in the background. The revolvers, especially the Gasa, really not that good.
Yeah.
The pistols in general, and the Flammerstop's one. The other one that's like the Beretta is stiff but okay. Same goes for the Rofstein and the Shayahan. Both are stiff but they're passable. Biggest example of
I
Frommerstop, and at least to me, our Frommerstop, and oh my god, the Glicenti.
Yeah, the
The
Glicenti is a pretty horrible example.
oh, the Glicenti is horrible. It is terrible. It is terrible. During development, there was a bug that broke the animation. The animation didn't play correctly. Frankly, I want and the devs fixed it, just so we're clear. But frankly, I want it back.
Yeah.
Give,
Yeah.
give me the broken animation back. I prefer not having to see the animation. The way I described the animations, and I don't want to be too rude, but I have said this to the devs, just so we're clear, is that it looks like like an animating intern did it in a day. Instead of actually someone that knows what they're doing taking their time. And
Kind of
I
weird. It's like
I don't know.
someone's really trying hard to do an weird animation style and being unique, but the animation style is just horrible. It's just horrible because it looks bad. It doesn't feel right, and I don't know what they are doing with it. It's if they got a new animator or something. There's also, you mentioned the other pistols, not just from a stop the Steyr. Also, there's some weirdness going on there where it's like with the clip reloads and stuff, there's some weirdness that wasn't even part of the previous games, and I don't know why it's suddenly there. Why if they changed animators or something, or if they just got someone really quick on to do it, and they just took whatever he submitted as like a preview or something. I don't know what the story behind it is, but the result is it doesn't look good, and it certainly doesn't look like 30 to 60 euro good.
Yeah, people need like you need. I know it's kind of annoying harping on it, but when you're pricing a game at 30 to 60 euro, you're not just saying I'm competing with other indie games. Then you're at that point. You're at the price level of Squad, Beyond the Wire, Postscriptum, AAA games. Like okay, Modern Warfare 2 is 70 euro for a pre-order, but still, AAA games like about Modern Warfare, Cold War, Vanguard, Battlefield 2042, all that jazz are all in that same price range at this point. And frankly speaking, you don't compete animation quality or sound quality wise with a Battlefield 4, for example. Like the price tag for the like I said before in the intro, I'm perfectly fine with quality over quantity. For example, personally, I really like Stray, that like cyberpunk cat game. Fantastic. I love it to bits. Played through it 2 or 3 times, I think twice, in 2 days or 3 days or whatever. It was a lot of fun. But that, for example, is a game that even has an achievement for beating it in 2 hours while being 26 euro, 27 euro. And that's but it's a game that I personally really enjoyed the story and the gameplay of. Even if the gameplay was basic, extremely basic, because it's just, button prompts, the story and the environments and stuff, it had a lot of work and effort and love put in. And that's good, and I enjoyed it. With Isonzo, the base edition is a similar price tag, but I can't really say the same. I don't hate the game, but it doesn't feel right.
Appropriate, yeah.
Yeah, price releasing it um with this amount of content while also having the sounds and animation quality and such be the way it is, and having as few maps as you do, while still having it be 30 euro. And before I forget, I mentioned 30 euro. That's the base price. The game is launching with another 30 euro worth of DLC. That's
Almost like
insanity. That's more money if you want to. That's literally more money than Beyond the Wire or Squad, where Squad is 45 euro. And it's a game that has how many? Like a dozen plus maps, I think, and they're massive maps. And 7 factions, I think it was, or 8 factions now, even if not, or if not more, even. Um, actually, I think it might be 9, because of the USMC and the Australians. So it's a lot of content for 45 euro, man. That's coming from someone that has 1,500 hours in the game, by the way. Um, Meanwhile, Isonzo has 22 guns. Me and Killwolf and like some other people on the Discord servers we share took the piss out of games like Battlefield 2042 for having like 20 odd guns on release. Isonzo literally has the same amount, except the animations compared to Battlefield 2042 are actually worse. And the
yeah.
price tag is, depending on which version you were talking about, technically the same. That's rough, man. I don't hate the game, but in no good conscience can I say, yes, fucking buy this game. Like, honestly, I can't. I'd say it's worth grabbing if you wait on a nice, good sale where it's like 50% off or more. Sure. Or if they add like a bunch of content improvements. But as it is right now, you got 6 maps, you got 20 weapons, you have some really fucking mixed bag sounds and animation design. Like, really mixed bag. And you have outdated movement. And you have nice, very. The performance and graphics, I will say, are fantastic, and the visual maps are great. But there's only 6 of them, and the objectives on them are repetitive because it's always the same 2 objectives. It's either run into a highlighted area and hold F, or run into a highlighted area and stay there until it's captured. That's it, right? Um, at least in games like the Infamy, the thing you're destroying is like an actual object. It's like ore drums or an anti-air gun or something along those lines. So it feels a bit more tangible than just blowing up a fucking cemetery, uh, or a base, forward base or whatever. But
I
yeah,
mean,
it's
one of the objectives is blowing up artillery guns, but
yeah,
yeah,
but it's still the same. And one of them is blowing up a train, but it's still the same. Run there, hold F. Like I mentioned in our talk when I wasn't recording, I mentioned Postscriptum. Postscriptum's D map D-Day map has one of the objectives be destroying some artillery guns, except it's not just, except the artillery guns you have to destroy are actual tangible fucking objects you have to destroy. You don't just run up there and hold F on them. You have to have one of you or one of your teammates which has explosives destroy them. Anti-tank rifle grenades from the M1 Garand. Sappers have C4, satchel charges they can use to destroy the field guns and stuff like that. It's a bit more dynamic than that. That's the most important part, is that it's a bit more dynamic. Obviously, different game, different map design, different philosophy, but the main point is that that's the only real game mode as well. So you have really one game mode at the moment, like proper game mode.
yeah,
6 maps, which are split into 3 campaigns, but one of the campaigns is, I think, just a single map anyway.
yeah,
Dolomiti specifically. One campaign is 2 maps, one campaign is 3 maps. And the campaign works kind of along the lines of Operation in Battlefield 1 and such. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, in no good, it's not a horrible game, but in no good faith can I say, yeah, dude, 30 euro is 30 to 60 euro. that absolutely worth it? Frankly, I just don't think it is. Um, I just don't really think it is.
Yeah, I'd say the issue on hand is that they maybe want too much or want to be too much. They kinda still have the feel of like
A small
the
indie game.
previous games,
Yeah.
small indie game, but at the same time they're trying to compete with way above their weight line
Yeah,
and they
absolutely.
don't really have something that to show for it.
We took the piss of Beyond the Wires of that a little bit with the tank evade, but Beyond the Wire, for example, outside of the placeholder sound effects that they added more recently with the tanks and the anti-tank gun, um, the actual guns feel a lot nicer. Like, and has a lot more gun variety in the game because obviously more factions and stuff. But still, the thing to remember with Isonzo is that you don't really have many weapon variety, like different weapon types or anything. It gets repetitive. It really does. The lack of weapons and the lack of maps, it suffers in that regard. It absolutely gets kind of repetitive with and stale. Um, because of how few maps there is, and because of the way the game and the maps are designed, you don't really have even the situations that you might run into with games like Karma or Squad, where you go, or like some of the bigger helicopter, maps in Rising Storm, which have helicopters, where you have that one squad that's just off their nut and try or do something completely fucking insane and succeed or fail and it's funny or whatever. But you don't really have that variety. Every map is generally the same, which is throw bodies at the objective until you either defend it for long enough or until you capture it, depending on which side you are. That's really about it. There's not really room for smart plays, maneuvering, all that stuff. The best you can hope for is finding a nice camping spot where the enemy won't shoot you immediately. It's not really much variety though in gameplay, frankly. And the lack
Yeah,
of variety in weapons means you can't really play around that much. Like, you have an option per in each faction, you have an option of a handful of different bolt actions. A revolver and like 2 pistols. It's just really not much. The Austro-Hungarians get 3 pistols, but still, the point is, it's not really very much. There's no flamethrowers, there's no shotguns, there's only one automatic weapon per faction.
action. Yeah.
There's a limited amount, like a lot of the weapons are limited to a single class, which with some makes sense, like the Villa Perosa and Madsen, but with others, it really, really doesn't. Like the Verndl, some of the
Yeah, or
carbines.
like or the assault only getting one pistol when there's like a ton more.
Yeah,
When like you really should have some more pistols for the assault, or maybe even allow something kinda funky, like allowing the assault to carry a secondary pistol, like 2 pistols at once. Like not akimbo, but like one in the primary slot and one in the secondary slot, and you can switch between the two.
I would like that to be honest. With the assault, that would be pretty cool. Having
Yeah,
two different primary weapons in case in return for forsaking the grenades in that slot. Which, by the
yeah,
way, is kind of what Tannenberg and Verdun did. For a bit of a throwback to finish off the video. When I was talking about the loadouts being balanced around that, that's the issue what I was talking about. Usually you'd have like revolver means 2 grenades, pistol means 1 grenade, bolt action and pistol, fantastic combination for direct damage, but then you get no grenade, so you can't like kill multiple people at once from behind cover and stuff like that. It's down upsides and downsides to the whole system, which kind of the
which
modular loadout system kind of removed that, but then more importantly, the restrictions in the loadout system itself that they implemented with which weapons go where to which class in which slot kind of impeded it further. Like
yeah, I'd say funny enough, Dunback with its still pretty like preset loadout system I'd say it's still very open to experimentation and finding stuff out, but the Isonzo loadout system just promotes using
Whatever is the
the
best
same
thing you
stuff.
have unlocked,
Yeah, whatever's the best.
basically.
It's not promoting using stuff for situations, but more promoting using just the best you have unlocked currently.
Which
And
would
I
usually
really don't
be
like that. Much prefer the system where you actually like make a conscious decision. I want something that works at range. I want something that like works at close range with grenades or something, or I want a melee weapon or something. And in Isonzo, you just mainly stick to
you're comfortable
whatever
with.
universally works.
Yeah, basically. And I mean, uh, it's what run happens with a lot of games that let you customize your loadout. Like, let's be honest, Call of Duty and such have the same issue where you have 30 guns, but only 2 are ever used. But like, still, it's still kind of disheartening to see because in Verdun and stuff, you saw a lot of different weapons. Really, you never really had like any one specific gun that everyone wanted to use. In Tannenberg as well, because you had everything really balanced very well. Though, minus the Mosin carbine, which is hideous and no one wanted.
Yeah.
Uh, but still, and you had like more than just one single shot gun, which was kind of neat. I
Yeah,
miss that
you had
Romanian.
like
I miss that
you had
Romanian
like instead of just one funky outlier, you had like some
3.
variants of that outlier. No, yeah, instead of just one, you had like multiple of those. So you had like the Martini Henry, you had the Berdan, you had the Wernle,
The Berdan was.
which is kind
Oh,
of fun that
I miss the Berdan.
you have like multiple versions of the single shot idea, and then you have Isonzo where it's like one.
To a single class, to a single faction. I'm sure
Yeah,
if you looked hard enough, you could absolutely find something for the Italians as
Italians
well. To be
probably.
honest, like technically, we wouldn't see frontline service. Though to be honest, neither would the Berdan. The Berdan. Berdan was a second line unit weapon, but I mean, wasn't the original the 1870 Vitelli Vitali a single shot? Yes, it was. It
Uh,
was. The 87 introduced a 4-round magazine. The 8715 converted it to a smokeless powder with 6 rounds. So if they brought in the original 1870, they could actually give us a single shot Vitelli Vitali, which is cool, but it's not gonna happen probably. I miss I,
yeah,
I miss single shots. Single shots are cool. They're like the big dick energy gun. And in Isonzo, it wouldn't be the case as much because you can just slap on a revolver because you're a sniper and you can just use a revolver and there's no reason not to. Outside of
yeah,
masochism, but in Tannenberg, the Berdan was the Berdan loadout. Literally, just had the Berdan. Like other loadouts had in that in the same class and squad all had like grenades and pistol and shit like that, and then the Berdan was just Berdan, nothing else, no secondary weapon, no grenade. Go fuck yourself. It's great. Like seeing someone do well with a Berdan was like, god damn, bro, that dude's cracked. But yeah, any last words?
um, I don't think I have anything else. Like I said, the devs really seem to try to punch above their weight line, but aren't really able to deliver on it. And yeah, the big word with the weapons, especially, is inconsistency because. Like we mentioned a lot of times, some stuff is good, some stuff is okay, and some stuff is just not really up to a 2022 game for this price.
Yeah, sounds about right. Well, that makes it for this. Jesus Christ, this is incredibly overly long video. If you actually finish it off, fucking hats off to you. You should probably find something better to do with your life. Uh, but yeah, feel free to like hit me up on Discord if you know me, or in the YouTube comments or whatever. I'll also leave a Twitch like channel link in the description. Though I don't really do Isonzo stuff. I might stream like Squad or Born or whatever else that people might find entertaining. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.